Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the forbidden valley, his weathered hands gripping the metal rail of his small transport ship. At 61 years old, his back ached and his joints protested every movement, but his eyes were sharp as he studied the alien landscape below. The valley of Velthara stretched out before him like a wound in the planet's surface, its crystalline formations catching the light of 3 distant suns. He knew he was about to break the most sacred law of the Kethmari people. No male had set foot in this valley for over 600 years. The penalty for violation was death, and the Kethmari were known throughout this sector of space as fierce warriors who never showed mercy to those who defied their laws. Marcus did not care. His wife Sarah lay dying in a medical facility 3 star systems away, her body consumed by the plague that had already killed millions of humans across the colonies. The doctors had given up hope weeks ago, but Sarah's final research notes had led him here. She believed the cure existed somewhere in this valley, hidden among the ancient ruins that the Kethmari guarded so jealously. The transport ship touched down on a flat area near the valley's center with a soft thud. Marcus winced as he stood up, his old bones protesting the movement. He had been a xenobiologist for over 30 years, studying alien life forms and their environments, but he had never attempted anything this dangerous or foolish. As he stepped out of the ship, the alien air hit his face. It was breathable for humans, though it tasted metallic and strange. The valley was eerily quiet, with no sound except the wind moving through the crystal formations that jutted up from the ground like frozen lightning. Marcus began unloading his equipment. He had brought everything he might need for an extended stay: food, water recyclers, scientific instruments, and a portable shelter. He worked slowly but steadily, his movements careful and deliberate. Every few minutes he paused to look around, expecting to see Kethmari warriors appearing on the valley's rim. The crystals around him were unlike anything he had seen before. They were not just decorative formations, but seemed to serve some purpose he could not understand. As he worked, he noticed they were beginning to glow faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. By the time he had his camp set up, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Marcus activated his scanning equipment and began taking readings of the area. The energy signatures were off the charts, far beyond anything his instruments had been designed to measure. He pulled out Sarah's research notes, written in her careful handwriting during her final weeks. She had spent years studying reports from deep space explorers, looking for patterns in ancient alien technology. According to her notes, this valley contained traces of the same energy signatures found in ruins across human space, ruins that always seemed to contain advanced medical technology. As darkness fell, the crystals grew brighter. Marcus realized they were not just glowing randomly, but forming patterns. Lines of light connected different crystal formations, creating a web of energy that covered the entire valley floor. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He set up his main scanner near the largest crystal formation and began a deep scan of the valley. The results made him step back in shock. The readings showed that the entire valley was artificial, built around some kind of massive structure buried deep underground. The crystals were not natural formations, but some kind of ancient technology, dormant for centuries but now responding to his presence. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien night air. He was beginning to understand why the Kethmari had forbidden males from entering this place. It was not about cultural traditions or religious beliefs. Something down there was designed to respond to specific biological triggers, and his presence was activating systems that had been sleeping for a very long time. His communication device crackled to life. The signal was faint but clear enough to understand. It was a Kethmari transmission, broadcasting on all frequencies in their harsh, clicking language. Marcus had learned enough of their language during his years of study to understand the basic meaning. They knew he was here. The transmission was a warning, telling him to leave immediately or face the consequences. Marcus looked at the glowing crystals around him, then at Sarah's notes in his hands. He thought of his wife lying in that hospital bed, her body failing while doctors stood helplessly by. He turned off the communication device without responding. The night passed slowly. Marcus worked by the light of the crystals, taking readings and collecting samples. The energy signatures continued to grow stronger, and he began to detect something else buried beneath the surface. It was not just technology, but something that seemed almost alive, responding to his scanning equipment with pulses of energy that felt like a heartbeat. By morning, the entire valley was humming with activity. The crystals had formed complex patterns of light that moved and shifted like living things. Marcus realized he had triggered something far beyond his understanding, something the Kethmari ancestors had feared enough to forbid any male from entering this place. As the suns rose, casting new light across the valley, Marcus saw movement on the ridges above. Dark shapes moved against the sky, too far away to make out clearly but obviously Kethmari warriors. They had found him just as he had expected they would. He continued his work, knowing that time was running short. Whatever lay beneath this valley, whatever his wife had believed could save humanity from the plague, he had to find it before the Kethmari stopped him permanently. The scanning equipment detected something new, a massive chamber far below the surface that was now fully active. Energy readings were off the scale, and his instruments were picking up signals that seemed almost like communication attempts. Something down there was trying to make contact. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to escape before the Kethmari reached him, he began setting up equipment for a deep drilling operation. If he was going to die in this valley, he would at least try to reach whatever Sarah had sent him to find. The Kethmari would arrive within hours. Marcus worked faster, driven by desperation and love for his dying wife. Around him, the ancient valley continued to wake up from its long sleep, responding to the presence of a human male for the first time in centuries. He did not know that he was about to discover the true purpose of this place, or that his actions would soon put both his species and the Kethmari in deadly danger. All he knew was that somewhere beneath his feet lay the key to saving the woman he loved, and he would face any enemy to find it. The crystals pulsed brighter, and deep underground, something ancient began to stir. War singer Zathara crouched on the valley's edge, her forearms steady as she watched the strange intruder through her scope. Her purple skin was marked with the ritual scars of a hunter, and her large black eyes missed nothing as she studied the creature below. This was not what she had expected to find. The corruption detectors had screamed warnings across the entire Kethmari homeworld. When the male presence entered the sacred valley, the matriarch council had sent her immediately, expecting to find one of their own males who had lost his mind and violated the ancient law. Males sometimes did this when they grew old and bitter, unable to accept their lesser role in society. But this creature was something else entirely. Zathara had never seen anything like it. The being was smaller than a Kethmari male, with only 2 arms and strange pale skin. It moved differently too, with careful, deliberate motions that spoke of intelligence and purpose rather than madness or desperation. She spoke into her communication device, reporting back to the council. "This is not one of ours. The intruder appears to be from an unknown species. It has set up some kind of camp and is operating scanning equipment." The response came quickly, harsh clicks and whistles that expressed the council's displeasure. "Unknown species or not, it has violated the sacred valley. Kill it immediately and cleanse the area." Zathara raised her plasma rifle, sighting on the creature's center mass. It would be an easy shot from this distance. Her finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. The valley was changing. In all her years as a warrior, Zathara had never seen the crystal formations glow like this. They pulsed with blue light that seemed to flow from one to another in patterns that hurt her eyes to follow. The entire valley floor was now covered in lines of energy that had never existed before. She lowered her rifle and activated her long-range scanner. The readings made her secondary heart skip beats. Energy signatures throughout the valley were hundreds of times higher than normal. Whatever this creature had done, it had awakened something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The creature below seemed unaware of her presence. It continued working with its strange equipment, taking readings and making notes on a small device. Occasionally it would look up at the glowing crystals with what appeared to be wonder and fear, but it never stopped working. Zathara made a decision that went against all her training. Instead of taking the shot, she began moving down into the valley, using the crystal formations for cover. She needed to understand what was happening before she acted. As she got closer, she could hear the creature making sounds. It was not the random noise of a mindless beast, but clearly some form of language. The sounds were softer than Kethmari speech, with flowing tones that rose and fell in patterns that almost seemed musical. She crept within 50 meters of the creature's camp and activated her translation matrix. The device was designed to analyze new languages and provide basic understanding, though it worked slowly with completely unknown forms of communication. After several minutes, fragments of meaning began to appear on her display. The creature was talking to itself, but the words it spoke made little sense. References to something called Sarah and plague and cure appeared repeatedly, but the context remained unclear. What became clear was that this creature was not here to desecrate the valley for religious or cultural reasons. It was searching for something specific, something it believed could help with some kind of disease or medical condition. Zethara's communication device buzzed with an incoming message from the council. Warsinger report. Why has the intruder not been eliminated? She hesitated before responding. The situation is more complex than expected. The creature has activated systems in the valley that have been dormant since the time of our ancestors. I request permission to observe before taking action. The reply was immediate and angry. You have your orders. Execute the intruder immediately. Before Zethara could respond, the valley filled with a sound unlike anything she had ever heard. It was not quite music and not quite machinery, but something that seemed to come from deep underground. The crystal formations began pulsing faster, and new patterns of light appeared that stretched across the entire valley floor. The creature below dropped its equipment and stared at the nearest crystal formation. It began speaking rapidly in its strange language, and Zethara's translator caught fragments. Sarah. I found it. The signal. Responding to human presence. Human. That was what this creature called itself. Suddenly, the largest crystal formation in the center of the valley erupted with light. A column of blue energy shot up into the sky, visible for hundreds of kilometers. Zethara's scanner went wild, detecting energy patterns that matched descriptions from the oldest Kethmari legends, the Deep Singers. The mythical guardians that their ancestors had spoken of in whispered stories, systems so advanced that they seemed like magic to primitive minds. According to legend, they had once protected this world from some terrible enemy, but had fallen silent long before the Kethmari arrived. Now they were waking up. The human creature was running toward the energy column, its scanning equipment forgotten. As it got closer, the column began to change, forming shapes and patterns that looked almost like written language, but in symbols no Kethmari had ever seen. Zethara's communication device exploded with chatter from the council. Every sensor on the planet had detected the energy release. Fleet commanders were reporting that ships throughout the system were picking up the signal. Whatever the human had awakened was broadcasting its presence across space. Warsinger, the voice of the High Matriarch herself, cut through the chatter. What is happening in that valley? Zethara looked down at the human, who was now standing directly beneath the energy column. Instead of being destroyed by the massive power output, the creature seemed to be communicating with it somehow. The energy patterns were changing in response to its presence, forming new configurations that grew more complex by the moment. The ancient systems are active, she reported. The human has awakened something our ancestors called the Deep Singers. It appears to be in direct communication with them. Silence on the communication channel. Then slowly the High Matriarch spoke. Impossible. The Deep Singers are legends. Stories told to children. I am looking at them now, Zethara replied. The human male has triggered something that requires biological specific characteristics to activate. The systems were waiting for the right genetic signature. The implications hit her even as she spoke the words. The ancient law forbidding males from the valley was not about cultural purity or religious tradition. It was about preventing this activation until the right time, until the right species arrived to operate systems the Kethmari had never understood. The human turned away from the energy column and looked directly at her hiding place. For a moment their eyes met across the distance. The creature showed no fear, only a kind of sad determination that reminded her of old warriors facing their final battle. It raised one hand in what might have been a greeting, then turned back to the energy column and began speaking to it again. Zethara realized that everything her people thought they knew about this valley was wrong. They were not its guardians but its caretakers, keeping it safe until the day when its true operators returned. The human had not come to violate their sacred space, it had come home. The High Matriarch's chambers filled with the sound of alarm signals as reports flooded in from across Kethmari space. The energy pulse from the sacred valley had been detected by sensors on every world in their territory. And now their deep space monitoring stations were picking up something far more disturbing. Ancient structures on a dozen different worlds were responding to the signal. Sites that the Kethmari had built their greatest cities around, places their ancestors had claimed as holy ground, were all showing the same energy signatures that now blazed from the valley of Velthara. High Matriarch Velandra studied the reports with growing dread. Her species had ruled this sector for over 2,000 years, building their civilization around the wisdom of their ancestors and the protection of the sacred sites. Now it appeared that everything they thought they knew was built on a foundation of ignorance. "Bring me the archive keepers," she commanded. "Find everything we have about the Deep Singers and the time before our people came to these worlds." While the archive keepers searched through ancient records, Velandra opened a communication channel to war singer Zethara in the valley. The warrior's report had shaken the very foundations of Kethmari society, but there was more at stake now than cultural confusion. "Warsinger, what is the status of the human creature?" Zethara's voice crackled through the communicator. "It continues to interact with the energy systems. The translations are becoming clearer. It calls itself Marcus Chen, and it appears to be receiving information about something called the Void Chorus." Velandra felt her blood turn cold. The Void Chorus was mentioned in the oldest Kethmari legends, stories so ancient that most scholars considered them mythology. According to those tales, the Void Chorus was an enemy that consumed entire worlds, turning living matter into more of itself until nothing remained but silent, empty space. "Archive keepers," she barked. "Find me everything about the Void Chorus now." The elderly scholars worked frantically through their databases while Velandra made the hardest decision of her reign. Despite every tradition and law of her people, she could not ignore what was happening. If the legends were true, if the Void Chorus was real, then the human in the valley might be their only hope of understanding how to fight it. "All fleets," she commanded, "converge on the valley of Velthara. Prepare for full military deployment, but do not engage the human unless directly ordered. We may need to protect it rather than destroy it." The response from her fleet commanders was immediate outrage. "High Matriarch, the creature has violated our most sacred law. It must be executed immediately to cleanse the contamination." "The contamination is not from the human," Velandra replied coldly. "The contamination is our ignorance. Move your fleets into position and await further orders." In the valley, Marcus Chen stood before the towering energy column, his mind reeling from the information flowing into his consciousness. The systems he had awakened were far more than just ancient technology. They were the remnants of a galactic defense network built by a coalition of species that had existed millions of years ago. The network had been designed for one purpose: to detect and defend against the Void Chorus, a machine intelligence that had already consumed half the galaxy before being driven into dormancy. Now, according to the Deep Singers, that dormancy was ending. The Void Chorus was waking up, and its scout units had already been detected in nearby star systems. Marcus tried to process what the ancient systems were telling him. Humanity was not just another species that had stumbled across these ruins. Human genetic patterns contained specific markers that identified them as descendants of one of the original builder species. The network had been waiting for humans to find it and reactivate the defenses. But there was a problem. The network had been damaged by time and neglect. Many of the nodes were offline or operating at reduced capacity. The Kethmari, despite their good intentions in protecting the sites, had prevented the maintenance protocols from running properly. Their rule forbidding males from the sacred sites had kept the systems from performing essential repairs. The Deep Singers showed him images of the approaching threat. Void Chorus scout ships were already probing the outer edges of the star system, testing defenses and mapping resources. The main fleet would arrive within days, bringing with it the power to strip every planet in the system down to its core elements. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. At 61 years old, dying slowly from radiation exposure to the ancient systems, he was apparently humanity's representative in a war that would determine the fate of all life in this part of the galaxy. The sound of aircraft approaching made him look up. Kethmari military transports were descending into the valley, their weapons trained on his position but not yet firing. Marcus could see the confusion in their movements, the uncertainty of warriors who had received conflicting orders. War singer Zethara emerged from her hiding place, her rifle lowered but ready. She approached cautiously, her translator device active and recording their conversation. Human Marcus Chen, she said in heavily accented but understandable English. My people are confused. You have awakened things that should not exist. Explain your actions. Marcus turned away from the energy column to face her. Up close, the Kethmari warrior was even more impressive than he had expected. Her 4 arms moved with fluid grace, and her large black eyes held intelligence and honor that reminded him of the best human soldiers he had known. I came here to save my wife, he said simply. She is dying from a plague that is killing millions of my people. Her research suggested that this place might contain medical technology that could help. Zethara's translator worked quickly, and she tilted her head in a gesture that might have been confusion or interest. You violated our most sacred law to help one female? To help all my people, Marcus corrected. But yes, I would have done it for her alone. The concept seemed to puzzle the Kethmari warrior. In their society, males were considered less important than females, valuable mainly for reproduction and manual labor. The idea that a male would risk everything for a female was outside their cultural understanding. The systems you have awakened speak of great danger, Zethara said. They show images of something called the Void Chorus. Our oldest legends mention this name. Marcus nodded grimly. Your ancestors were part of the original coalition that fought them. That's why you were drawn to these worlds, why you built your civilization around these sites. You were following genetic memories, instincts inherited from your predecessors. More aircraft arrived carrying Kethmari soldiers and scientists. They established a perimeter around the energy column, but kept their distance, clearly uncertain how to proceed. Marcus could see them taking readings and making reports, trying to understand what they were witnessing. The energy column pulsed brighter, and new information flowed into Marcus's mind. The Deep Singers had detected the Kethmari fleet movements and were analyzing their technology. The ancient systems were pleased to discover that the Kethmari had preserved and improved much of the original defensive infrastructure, even without understanding its true purpose. Your fleets, Marcus said to Zethara. The Deep Singers want to interface with them. Your ships contain technology derived from the original defense network. With the right modifications, they could be turned into weapons capable of fighting the Void Chorus. Zethara spoke rapidly into her communicator, relaying the information to her commanders. The response was immediate and heated, with multiple voices arguing in the harsh Kethmari language. They do not trust you, she said finally. They believe this may be a trick to steal our military secrets. Marcus laughed, a sound with no humor in it. In about 6 days, none of our secrets will matter. The Void Chorus doesn't negotiate or conquer. It consumes. Everything in this system will be turned into raw materials for more machines unless we work together. The energy column flared again, and suddenly the valley filled with new sounds. Deep underground, massive systems were coming online. Ancient factories that had been dormant for millions of years began producing weapons and defenses. The very ground beneath their feet became a construction site as the planet prepared for war. Marcus looked up at the Kethmari aircraft, surrounding them, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Tell your High Matriarch that I'm not asking for her trust. I'm offering her a choice. Work with me to fight an enemy that will destroy both our species, or die alone while cursing the human who tried to save everyone. The ancient systems around them hummed with increasing power, and in the darkness of space, something vast and hungry began moving toward their world. High Matriarch Valandra stood on the command bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display with growing disbelief. The humans' warnings had proven accurate with terrifying speed. Less than 4 days after Marcus Chen had awakened the Deep Singers, Kethmari deep space sensors detected massive objects entering the outer system. The Void Chorus had arrived ahead of schedule. How many ships? She asked her tactical officer. We cannot determine ship count, High Matriarch. The objects are too large to be individual vessels. Each one is roughly the size of a small moon. Valandra studied the sensor readings. The approaching objects showed no signs of conventional propulsion, but they were accelerating toward the inner system at speeds that should have been impossible for structures of that size. Worse, the energy signatures coming from them matched the descriptions in the oldest Kethmari archives. These were the Silent Enders, the world killers that had haunted her people's ancestral memories for thousands of years. Open a channel to the human in the valley, she commanded. Marcus Chen's face appeared on the screen, and Valandra was shocked by how much he had aged in just 4 days. His skin was pale and drawn, His eyes sunken with exhaustion, the ancient systems were burning through his life force, using his biological energy to power their awakening. "High Matriarch," Marcus said with a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "I assume you've detected our visitors." "The Void Chorus moves faster than your prediction suggested." Marcus nodded weakly. They were already closer than the Deep Singers realized. The machines have been building new bodies for themselves in the dark spaces between stars. "What you're seeing are just the advanced scouts." The implications sent a chill through Valandra's body. If these moon-sized monstrosities were merely scouts, what would the main force look like? "Can your ancient systems defend against them?" she asked. "Not alone," Marcus replied. "The network was designed to work with living allies, not operate independently. It needs ships, crews, and commanders who can adapt to changing situations. It needs the Kethmari fleet." Valandra looked around at her officers. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also the determination that had made the Kethmari the dominant force in this sector. They were warriors bred for battle and raised on stories of their ancestors' victories against impossible odds. "What do you need from us?" Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, they glowed with the same blue light as the energy columns in the valley. "Send your ships down to the planetary surface. The Deep Singers will interface with their systems and upgrade them with weapons that can hurt the Void Chorus. But your crews will need to accept human advisors." The bridge fell silent. The idea of allowing aliens aboard Kethmari warships was almost as shocking as the concept of working with males in the Sacred Valley. But before Valandra could respond, her communications officer spoke up. "High Matriarch, we're receiving a transmission from human space. It's being relayed through the ancient network." A new face appeared on the screen, a human female with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore the uniform of what appeared to be a military organization, and her bearing suggested high rank and considerable authority. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force," the woman said. "I'm told my husband is working with your people to defend against the Void Chorus threat." Marcus straightened up at the sound of her voice, and for the first time since Valandra had been watching him, he smiled. "Sarah, you're supposed to be in the hospital." "The plague broke 3 days ago," she replied. "Whatever you did in that valley, it worked. The medical data transmitted by the Deep Singers contained the cure we needed. Millions of lives have been saved." Valandra watched the exchange with fascination. The human male had risked everything to save his mate, and his actions had inadvertently provided salvation for his entire species. It was a level of devotion that Kethmari culture found difficult to understand, but impossible not to respect. "Marcus," Admiral Chen continued, "we've been analyzing the Deep Singer transmissions. Human fleets throughout this sector are being upgraded with the new technology. We'll be at your position in 18 hours with everything we can spare." "That may not be enough time," Marcus said. "The Void Chorus scouts will reach the inner system in 12 hours. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Then we'll buy you the time you need." Chen out. The transmission ended, leaving the Kethmari bridge in stunned silence. Valandra realized she had just witnessed something that would be talked about in warrior songs for generations. A human fleet preparing to sacrifice itself to protect alien allies they had never met. "All ships," she commanded, "begin immediate descent to planetary orbit. Prepare to integrate with the ancient systems as directed by the human." Her tactical officer stepped forward. "High Matriarch, many of our commanders are requesting permission to withdraw their ships from this action. They do not wish to place Kethmari vessels under alien command." Valandra looked at the tactical display, where the Void Chorus scouts continued their relentless approach toward her homeworld. In 12 hours, they would begin the process of converting every living thing in the system into raw materials for their war machine. Her people would be extinct within days unless she acted. "Any commander who withdraws from this battle will be stripped of rank and exiled," she announced. "We are warriors. We do not run from enemies, even enemies we do not understand." Over the next several hours, Valandra watched in amazement as the ancient systems transformed her fleet. Kethmari warships that had been built using technology salvaged from ruins were revealed to be crude copies of far more sophisticated designs. The Deep Singers guided engineering teams through modifications that turned familiar weapons into devices capable of tearing apart the molecular bonds that held matter together. Human advisors began arriving via the ancient transportation network, appearing in columns of blue light aboard Kethmari ships. Most of them were scientists and engineers. but a few were military officers who had experience fighting desperate battles against overwhelming odds. Velandra found herself working directly with a human named Colonel Rodriguez, a small dark-haired woman who spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too many battles. The human's knowledge of tactics and strategy was impressive, but what struck Velandra most was her complete lack of fear in the face of approaching annihilation. "Your people do not seem concerned about dying," Velandra observed as they planned their defensive formations. Colonel Rodriguez smiled grimly. "We're terrified, but fear is just another piece of data to consider when making decisions. The Void Chorus has destroyed human colonies before. We know what happens if we lose. How do you function when you know you might die?" "Same way you do," the human replied. "We focus on the mission and trust our allies to do their jobs. The difference is that humans have learned to make allies out of anyone who's willing to fight beside us, even people we've never met before." As the Void Chorus scouts entered the inner system, Velandra began to understand what made humans dangerous. It was not their technology or their physical capabilities. It was their ability to find common ground with anyone who shared their goals, to build trust in the middle of chaos, and to fight with the desperate courage of people who had nothing left to lose. The first Void Chorus construct entered weapons range, and the battle for the survival of all organic life in the system began. The first Void Chorus construct filled the view screen like a nightmare made real. Its surface writhed with mechanical tentacles that constantly reshaped themselves, building new weapons and defenses as the situation demanded. Energy beams lanced out from its hull, each one capable of vaporizing a battleship. War singer Zethara gripped the controls of her fighter as it screamed through space alongside a mixed formation of human and Kethmari vessels. The human pilot flying beside her, Lieutenant Morrison, maintained constant radio chatter that would have been annoying under normal circumstances, but now felt reassuringly familiar. "Kethmari Flight Leader, we're reading weak points in the construct's energy matrix, transmitting targeting data now." Zethara's screens lit up with information provided by the ancient Deep Singer systems. The seemingly solid surface of the enemy construct was revealed to be a complex network of power conduits and manufacturing nodes. Strike the right combination of targets and the entire structure would collapse. "Human Flight Leader, Kethmari Attack Formation Alpha. We strike together. Copy that, Warsinger. All ships weapons free." The combined fleet attacked in perfect coordination, human and Kethmari pilots working together as if they had trained for years instead of hours. Zethara watched her plasma cannons tear through the construct's defenses, while human ships provided covering fire and electronic countermeasures. The construct began to crumble, its surface breaking apart as internal explosions cascaded through its structure. But even as it died, it was broadcasting signals to its approaching companions, sharing information about the defender's capabilities. "That was the easy one," Lieutenant Morrison said over the radio. "The others will adapt to our tactics," he was right. The second construct entered weapons range already reconfigured to counter their attack patterns. Its hull bristled with point defense systems designed specifically to target the weapons they had just used successfully. In the Valley of Velthara, Marcus Chen watched the battle through sensors that gave him a perspective, spanning the entire star system. His body was failing rapidly, consumed by the energy requirements of coordinating the ancient defense network. But his mind remained sharp and focused. The Deep Singers were learning from every exchange, adapting their systems to counter each new Void Chorus configuration. But the enemy was learning too, and it had advantages that worried Marcus deeply. The Void Chorus constructs were not just weapons but mobile factories, capable of building new units from whatever materials they could consume. Already, the enemy scouts were harvesting asteroids and space debris, turning raw materials into swarms of smaller attack units. Soon the defenders would be outnumbered by thousands to one. "Sarah," Marcus spoke to his wife's image on the communication screen. "How long until the human fleet arrives?" Admiral Chen looked exhausted, but her voice remained steady. 14 hours. "Marcus, our sensors are showing more Void Chorus units entering the system. A lot more." Marcus closed his eyes and accessed the Deep Singer long-range scanners. What he saw made his heart sink. The main Void Chorus fleet was enormous. Hundreds of constructs, each larger than the scouts they were currently fighting. Worse, the enemy had learned from conflicts in other star systems and had developed new tactics specifically designed to counter the ancient defense networks. "They know about the Deep Singers," he told Sarah. "They've fought these. systems before and won. Then how do we beat them? Marcus smiled, feeling a familiar warmth despite the cold certainty of approaching death. The same way humans always win. We do something they don't expect. High Matriarch Velandra received the humans' transmission with grim understanding. Marcus Chen's plan was insane, suicidal, and completely contrary to every principle of military strategy she had ever learned. It was also probably their only chance of survival. "You want us to abandon our defensive positions and attack the main fleet directly?" she asked. "The Void Chorus expects us to defend this system until they wear us down with superior numbers," Marcus explained. "They've done this before against species that tried to fight conventional battles. But they've never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for a single decisive strike." "What you're proposing isn't sacrifice," Velandra replied. "It's suicide." "No," Marcus said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "It's human." The plan was elegantly simple in its madness. Instead of waiting for the main Void Chorus fleet to arrive, the combined human Kethmari force would use the ancient transportation network to jump directly into the heart of the enemy formation. They would target the command construct, the central intelligence that coordinated all Void Chorus operations in this sector. Destroying it would not stop the individual constructs, but it would break their coordination and turn a unified enemy force into scattered individual units that could be defeated over time. The catch was that the transportation network could only move ships one way. Once they jumped into the enemy formation, there would be no retreat, no escape, no second chances. They would win or die in a single engagement. "All ships," Velandra announced to her fleet. "Prepare for final jump. Target is the enemy command construct. We will destroy it or die in the attempt." The response from her commanders was immediate and unanimous. Every ship reported ready for battle. Every crew prepared to follow their High Matriarch into what was almost certainly their final fight. As the fleet prepared for transport, Marcus made his final preparations. The energy required to move so many ships across interstellar distances would burn out the remaining Deep Singer nodes on the planet. More importantly, it would require him to serve as a living conduit for power levels that would kill him within minutes. "Marcus," Sarah's voice was soft on the communicator, "I'm proud of you. I love you," he replied. "Take care of our people." The transportation sequence began with a sound like reality tearing apart. One by one, the ships of the combined fleet vanished in columns of blue light, carried across space by technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. Marcus felt his life burning away as each ship made the jump. But he held on until the last vessel had safely reached the target zone. Then, with Sarah's face still visible on his screen, he channeled the final surge of power that would give the fleet their one chance at victory. The attack caught the Void Chorus completely off guard. Hundreds of human and Kethmari ships materialized in perfect formation around the command construct, their weapons already firing at targets identified by the Deep Singer analysis. The ancient enemy, accustomed to fighting defensive battles against terrified civilizations, had no response ready for such an aggressive assault. Warsinger Zethara found herself flying alongside human pilots in a desperate charge toward the command construct's core. Enemy fire filled space around them, destroying ships faster than she could count, but the survivors pressed forward with the kind of reckless courage that she was beginning to understand was purely human in origin. "All ships, final attack run," Admiral Chen's voice came over the radio. "Make it count." The command construct began to collapse as its critical systems failed under the concentrated assault. As it died, the coordination links to the rest of the Void Chorus fleet went dark, leaving individual constructs confused and vulnerable. The battle was won, but at a cost that would be remembered for generations. 2/3 of the attacking fleet had been destroyed in the assault, and Marcus Chen's life force had been completely consumed by the effort to transport them across space. In the valley of Velthara, the ancient systems fell silent as their human operator finally succumbed to the energy drain. But before he died, Marcus had triggered one final sequence, broadcasting the location and vulnerability data for every remaining Void Chorus construct to human and Kethmari forces throughout the galaxy. The war would continue for years, but the tide had turned. Humanity and the Kethmari had forged an alliance built on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Other species would join them, drawn by the example of two civilizations that had chosen to trust each other in the face of extinction. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the valley where her husband had died, watching as Kethmari engineers worked alongside human scientists to rebuild the ancient defense network. The cure for the plague that had brought Marcus here in the first place had been only the beginning. The Deep Singers had shared medical technology that would benefit both species for centuries to come. War singer Zethara approached, moving with the careful respect due to a warrior's widow. "Admiral Chen, the High Matriarch has asked me to convey her gratitude for your husband's sacrifice." Sarah nodded, her eyes still fixed on the now silent crystal formations. "He would have been pleased to know that his actions saved more than just our people. The Kethmari will remember Marcus Chen is the human who taught us that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those willing to break the rules when honor demands it." As the two women stood together in the quiet valley, ships from a dozen different species continued to arrive, all drawn by the signal that Marcus had broadcast in his final moments. The galaxy was waking up to the reality of the Void Core's threat, but it was also discovering that unity was possible between even the most different civilizations.